very, very welcome this evening. And we have waited for this evening for a long time. All of you, everybody that's here this evening, along with their families, with their I was going to say their in-laws and their outlaws and their better parts and their, we won't say what else. But anyway, all of you have turned out this evening. And it's just great to see you all. And I'm sure you're looking behind you here and you see some lovely photographs. And those photographs were taken by an absolute gentleman and a very, very experienced photographer. And I think we'll start by giving the man of the evening a big round of applause. He says he's usually behind the camera, but this evening we have him out front. And I think it's the right place for him. Just want to say to you all, this idea was, I suppose, conceived, Brian, I suppose, by yourself and myself.
No, just by yourself.
By myself. It happens sometimes, it happens sometimes. An odd time I have a good idea, Brian, not often, but this was one very good idea. But during COVID, and we were all missing each other and not being able to see each other very often, and we thought it was very, very important that we have something that would make us all smile, that would, everybody I think was being a little bit more reflective because people had a little bit more time, because I know if I asked Bishop Colum in normal times to agree to an interview and have his photograph taken, he'd be too busy. And if I asked Derek Mchugh, he's awful busy every day, and Patsy Bryody and Kathleen Caherly and so many others. So this was a time when everybody was at home, so it was a very good time to capture people. But it was also a very, very generous of all of you to agree to let Brian into your homes and to sit down and do an interview. And one lady said to me, I told him things that I never told anybody else. Now, he didn't tell me what those things were, so I won't be repeating it, and I'm sure he won't either. But I'd say he might have a few little stories to tell, I hope, anyway. But seriously, this book has gone viral. This is a word now that's used in internet and social media and so on. But it literally has gone around the world. And a lot of you know that yourselves. I have got letters from Florida, from Germany, from different parts of the UK, from France, from all sorts of places. And people that remembered you, our Longford diaspora, that are spread all around the globe in particular. And many, many people there remembered different people here. In some of the letters I got, there were little anecdotes about you. Bishop Colum, I heard a good few stories about you. Kathleen Caherly, I heard a few stories about you too. And as for Benny Reid and some of his antics, Jimmy Donohoe down there has had loads of stories to tell, but we have heard, and as for Ursula, where's Ursula down there? Is she down there? Ursula, we've heard a few stories about you too. They're not all in the book. Anyway, it's just great to see you all here this evening. And we really wanted this to happen. And we couldn't let it happen until now.
When you look through the book, you see faces of people that, for me, I grew up with all of you. And I read your story, and thank you so much for allowing me the privilege, and everybody who buys this book, the privilege of knowing a little part of each and every one of you. When I was speaking to different people before, when we came in here tonight, I was talking to Kitty Hughes. And Kitty introduced me to Mrs. Newman. That's what I always called Mrs. Newman. And sure, we didn't need an introduction. We travelled the highways and byways of the Midlands and beyond to Feshes with our daughters. And they were very special times. And Hilda was always a woman that you'd meet. And she had a smile on her face and a kind word. And I think that's the thread that runs all through this book. Kindness, decency, and goodness. And I say that, and I humbly ask you to accept those compliments, because they're from my heart. Each and every page that you turn in this book tells a story, a tiny snippet of something very, very special that we needed to know. In a time of a pandemic that stole 2.5 years of my life, of all of your lives, it was a horrible time. It was a time that stopped us in our tracks. And I remember saying at the time, you know, we'll go back to basics and people will take time and they'll slow down and they'll take time like what I call to mind with the people in this book and on all of the pages. I mightn't know you all very well, but I know 90% of you well enough that when we met or when we used to meet on the streets, you'd say hello and you'd get a smile back. Say, how are you? How is things? Those days, unfortunately, are gone. But not for our generation. They're still there. You're still interested. And it's still lovely to say, hello, how are you? And you mean it. The person mightn't stop and tell you their life story, but the smile of assurance is grand and you can go on about your business. But every page in this book is very, very special. Kathleen Caherly. I know Kathleen and her family for what seems forever. And yet, I don't know the first thing about Kathleen, only that she's a lovely woman who worked in the library. I used to meet her where I worked in Paul Byron's in the shopping centre. We'd chat about our children, chat about the weather. And sure, wasn't that enough, Kathleen? And when I read your story and I see the picture, each story is unique. And I have to say, Brian Farrell, your picture, they say it tells 1,000 words. Well, every picture relates in a special way to everybody that's in this book. For me, it was just pure magic. Jimmy Donohoe. I know Jimmy for a lifetime, but I never really knew him to talk to until last year when we had a break in the pandemic out in Granard. You're a real true Granard man and you love your own place. Thank you, Jimmy, for what you contributed to your own place. And it was a pleasure to meet you and to know you. Anne Heslin, another woman I know all of my life, and yet I never really knew your story. But another lady who was always a pleasure to meet, whether it was in my place of business, selling shoes, or whether again it was going to Mass or on the street. It was always a pleasure, and I told your grandson, you have one very special granny, a woman whose legacy will last forever, because along with Sylvia Dawson, and I didn't know this, Anne, you are very much a part of the big story that is St. Christopher's. Thank you for your time, your kindness and your foresight, and for sharing your talent with children that it made such a difference to. Jude Flynn. Well, I've nothing to say about Jude Flynn, so I'll just move on. Jude Flynn is part of the very fabric of our society. Jude, I have been at almost every launch of your Fireside Tales. It's part of the Christmas in the Nolan household. And when our family get together, they each get a copy. And they have it in their homes, and they look at it now and again, and they're very proud of their own place. You depicted the stories of people who taught themselves to be ordinary. And when you read their story, Jude, you immortalised those people and their memories, and they've all turned out to be extraordinary. Just like the 30 people on the pages of this book. How they were chosen, I don't know, but each and every single one of you deserve your place in this book, because each and every single one of you are part of the very fabric of our county's society. Kitty Hughes. Well, what can you say about Kitty Hughes that hasn't already been said? No, poor Kitty. Thank you, Kitty. Thank you for what you've done all through the pandemic. Our CEO of Longford County Council and the directorate at Longford County Council decided to set up an online support group for our community. And Kitty played her part in that. She represented our older people's network. And Kitty kept in touch with people right throughout the pandemic, through the cocooning, through the lockdown, and she was there and she reported back to the greater committee the needs of the people that she was representing. Kitty, you're some woman for one woman. That's all I can say. Michael J Farrell. I met Michael and I told him it was a pleasure to meet him again. And reading your story, again, it's a very, very special insight into a life well lived. Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you again for what you have contributed to our county. Chris Kennelly. I think that I've never met Chris, but I feel I've known her all my life because my husband Paddy worked out in the ESB in Lanesborough. And when the kids were small, Paddy used to always tell them that the very famous Kerry footballer, I'm lost for his name now, O'Connell, Mick O'Connell, exactly, was Chris's brother. So that's how I feel I know Chris. And again, a wonderful story of a very wonderful woman. I'd say about, I stand corrected on the timeline now, but about 45, 46 years ago, a new housing estate on the end of town, on the very edge of town, at the top of the Battery, the Domain, with 46 houses, was built, and there were a special scheme where you got your mortgage, you built the home of your dreams, your forever home, and those houses were filled with all young couples who raised their families and made the Main their home. One of those people, and there's a number of them in the book, was Sean Constantine. Sean, your story is something I never knew about you, but I always knew the man that you were and the work ethic that you instilled in your children. Sean, the contribution that you and your family have made to Longford is something very, very special. Sean was the superintendent in the Guards in Longford at one stage, and he's a number of family sons that followed in his footsteps. He had a daughter who was on the missions, and her life was in danger at one stage, and there was prayers and candles lit in every house in the Domain, so as Mary would be returned home safely, and indeed she was. Sean Constantine, a life well lived, a great neighbour, and thank you again for the contribution you and your family, what you made and what your family continues to make in our county. Patrick Briardy, I have to say, I know the face, I know the man, but again, I never knew his story. And the picture depicts a man who's content with life, a man that has lived a life well lived, and a man who looks very, very pensive. He's not looking back, he's looking forward, and may you continue to look forward, and I wish you the best of health into the future. John Casey. John, again, fabulous picture, wonderful story. John, continued health and success. And what you contributed to this county is something very, very special as well. I can't labour on everybody, but I just have to say, you deserve your place in this book. You're in good company, and thank you from the Gairlic of this county, representing the people of this county. Thanks for your contribution. Mary McGovern. I met Mary for the first time this evening, and I love what your father says to you, Mary. Mind yourself. That's a parting glass, if you like, when you leave my house as well, my children. Mind yourself. And I also used to add, bless your face, and that used to really make them roar with laughter, in a good way. I don't know Mary very well, but I do know Mary's son, Turlough, Councillor Turlough McGovern, a man with a heart as big as himself, and who will continue to make a great contribution, Mary, to the society, to Longford, that you chose to live in. A lot of the people on the pages of this are here because they were born here. A lot of people are here because of affairs of the heart. And Mary, you were one of those people. It was the love of a good man that brought you from Kerry to Longford. So, look, best wishes, Mary. I'm glad you came to Longford because we're all the better for having you here. And your legacy is something that will be continued on Longford County Council with your son. PJ Mellon, I don't know if you're here.
PJ is over there, yes, he is, over to the right there.
Hi, how are you? And I know you most of my life as well. And reading your story, again, something very, very special. Thank you for your contribution to Longford. It is something that makes the place we live in all that much better by what you contributed. Lucy, what can I say? Lucy, look, knowing you and the woman that you are for so many years. Oh, it must be 50 years. I would have always thought you an exceptionally elegant woman, a woman of great stature. And that is obvious with the life you've lived and what happened in your early years. And thank you for sharing that with us. It's a wonderful story, and it made you the woman you are. And again, as I says to Kitty, you're some woman for one woman. And I wish you nothing but health and happiness for the future. Eamon Kramer. Eamon, you are a man of many talents. Thank you for preserving so much of our history and continued success. And your legacy will live on for future generations. Sister Margaret, I met you for the first time this evening, but I said I did know your brother and your sister. Your sister taught me in the Convent of Mercy. A life well lived, a life that has contributed so much. Like all of you in these pages, you're all givers. You're people that have given of yourselves, and in so doing, you have made life so good for so many people. Maureen Mulryan. I remember when Maureen moved back from London. Maureen was living in London and she worked there for most of her young life. And Maureen wanted to come home because she wanted to be among friends. Maureen, your story is touching. It's reflective of a time. Again, it made you the woman you are, Maureen, because I'm privileged to know you well. I wish you nothing but the best of good health, and thank you for sharing that story with us. Because it's not easy. When things upset and annoy you in your young life, that you carry with you right into your golden years, it's lovely to let it out on paper. And thank you for sharing, Maureen. Now, the next, I did ask Brian how to pronounce our next young man who's in the centre page of our book, but he said he just wanted to be known as Hubert. Hubert is somebody who came to Longford because of untold circumstances and a terrible background, not in his family, but in the place where he came from. I know that you've all read the book, so again, there's 30 people that I want to reflect on and to thank. So I wish you well. I hope Longford is as good to you as you deserve it to be, and I know you will bring your own talents and experiences, and you will make our community all the more special for you deciding to live here. And I hope you get to live here. I hope you get your forever home, a job, and that I know the people will embrace you, because that's the sort of people we are in Longford. Anne Kane. I've known Anne Kane all of my life. I know Anne Kane's family. And I know Anne is another smiley face. And I say that, it sounds simple, but it's something very, very special. When you meet someone in the morning or you meet someone in the middle of the day, you might be rushing and fussing about, and you meet Anne and she'll stop you in your tracks because she is that sort of calming person. And she'll say hello, and it's from the heart. You have a few words. And Anne raised a fantastic family who are leaving their mark in our society and in Longford. Kane's Travel, Kane's Coaches, and they had a pub at one stage. So all of that is not what's important to Anne. What's important to Anne is she's very active in St. Vincent de Paul, a kind and giving, caring woman, a reflection of most of the people on these pages. Mickey Gannon, another man who has left his mark on our county. Mickey reared a family of 6 girls. Each and every one of them has the same work ethic as Mickey. And I don't know if any of them are here this evening. Hi, Anne, how are you? I know that the work ethic that your dad has instilled in all of you has again enriched the commerce of our county town and beyond. You're in the teaching professions as well. But one thing about your dad is he is so, so proud of all of you. And that comes across in this story. So give him my best regards when you see him. Bishop Colum. Bishop Colum christened our firstborn. She made her first communion and you officiated at that too. Her confirmation, you were then bishop. And I remember when she came home just after the fire in St. Mel's. and she asked if you would stand in for a photograph with herself, and she has only one little girl. And that photograph has pride of place in her home in London. And it's a talking point because obviously the restoration of St. Mel's is something that any Longford person should and are very, very proud of. So when they have people over for dinner, be it family or be it friends, the story of St. Mel's is always told. You are somebody who, you're one of us, Bishop. You are somebody who reached out to everybody. You embraced Longford, you embraced the county. When you rose to the position of Bishop, it was heartening for all of us because, again, Bishop, you were one of us. Thank you for the contribution you made, and I wish you continued health and happiness. And St. Mel's probably would have been restored, of course it would, but with the calm and steadying hand of you at the helm to see that through, again, thank you so much. It's our privilege that you're among us tonight. Benny Reid. Now, Benny and I would be opponents politically. Because there wasn't a count, but Benny would look over and nod, as much as say, oh God, she's there again. But always, there was always kindness in it, Benny. And I knew that you meant well, and I thank you for that. Now, if I knocked out a Fianna Fáiler, I apologise. But I was never that political. I was a people person, and politics was something that got me to where I could do some good. Anyway, Benny, your contribution is something. The young people that you taught and that you influenced will make their mark in the world, and they will make a mark because of you, Benny. Thank you so much. The learning, the teaching profession is something that we don't take for granted. Next to family, the people that make the greatest impact on our young people are our teachers. So you have to have something special to do that and to pass on skills, life skills. Anyone can teach from a book, but it's the life skills and it's how young people conduct themselves that really are the mark of a good teacher. Thank you for what you've done and for the young people who you helped all through your teaching life. Thanks very much. And I remember your family and your brother and your sister, and they made huge contributions to our community as well when they lived on the Park Road. Mary McGushan, I know Mary all my life. You're another smiley face. A woman who, again, stretches out to the entire community. Somebody who's lived 30 years among us. I hope you know that you're one of us now. You're not a blow-in. Nobody in this book is a blow-in. Anyone in these pages deserves their part. And you are very, very much part of the fabric of the Longford we're living in now. Paddy Egan, not a thing to say about Paddy, sorry. Paddy Egan is a legend in Longford, and I don't think anyone can take that away from him. There's nothing about her history that Paddy doesn't know. And he is so generous, and he will impart all his knowledge at the drop of a hat. Paddy Egan, wherever you're sitting, thank you so much. Thank you for the wealth of knowledge that you have and that you impart to all of us. You make our lives richer. Continue doing what you're doing, Paddy, because you're very, very special. My dear friend May Donlan can't be here tonight, but I would think, and nobody could deny, Longford's own fashionista.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is meant as a compliment, but it isn't all that May is. May Donlan is a woman who loves her native Leitrim, and I've never saw a woman love her adopted county as much. May is living in Longford again because of an affair of the heart. She met and fell in love with Tony Donlan. She raised 3 magnificent children who are making their own mark in Longford. May ran the family business. I think she's taken a little step back now. Her son Mark is doing a fantastic job. And when you see Donlan logistic trucks trundling by, and my goodness, there's enough of them on the road, I think May would be grateful if we'd all say a little prayer to keep the drivers safe. The business will always succeed because of the people at the helm, but I know May's a woman who thinks about her staff and wants them to be safe and well from the leave Donlan's yard until the return from wherever they're going across Europe. Again, I go back to the Domain. The Domain is a place that I have been so privileged to live in, because every house, people live on their own, but if something is wrong, people are there for you. And one of my other great neighbours is Pat Horrigan. Pat is noted for his ability as an artist, but Pat is a great neighbour as well, and a great man. Again, we are at odds with our political beliefs, but that doesn't make any difference. It only makes for great conversation. And I love meeting Pat because he is a man with a great interest in town. He wants things done and he doesn't mind asking a politician to do it. So Pat, delighted you're my neighbour and friend, and I have a number of your pieces, not enough, but with the help of God, I'll build up a collection, because your work is something very, very special. And I think it'd be worth investing in. Stocks and bonds are not my thing, but art by Pat Horrigan could become my forte. May Casey, lovely to see you here tonight, May. We had a little conversation before this proceeding started. You haven't changed, May. You're always the wonderful woman I remember. Keep well and keep safe, and thank you for your contribution. Louis Mcintyre. God, I hope I'm nearly finished and I'm not boring you, but I really want to thank everybody in this book. Louis Mcintyre is a man for all seasons. And I say that from the heart, because I soldiered on Longford County Council for nearly 25 years with Louis. And sure, I'm only a beginner, sure. Louis had 40 years service to this county. And every one of those years you made count, Louis. You made them count for... When you go into political life, the most important thing you have to believe in, that you can make a difference. Louis, you did make a difference. And your legacy lives on in your family. And I wish you and Margaret continued health and happiness. And thank you, Louis, for what you've done for our community. Ursula Miguel. Now, I mean, we're not at the races when it comes to the life story that Ursula lived. Oh, my goodness, living with royalty. Ursula, a most unassuming woman, a lovely, lovely, kind, gentle woman who I met on many occasions. You're always a joy to meet. Your life is well lived. I have to say, I wish I lived in half the luxury that you became accustomed to, but you deserved it. Thank you again for what you do and what you have done, and for the legacy you leave behind. Derek Mchugh. I have to say, I don't know Derek as well as I know his wife and his family. But when you know the family and you know Mrs. Mchugh, you know that there has to be somebody in the background that's driving the family, the entire family. I don't feel comfortable saying Derek Mchugh. I feel very comfortable saying Mr. Mchugh. And I always refer to your wife as Mrs. Mchugh. Your family are wonderful. What you do for this county is well known. You have a work ethic that is second to none. You've raised a family that continue in your vein. Thank you so much, and thank you for the legacy you have left. Michael Casey. What can I say? I don't have any of your pieces, but sure, look, it's never too late. And you're known near and far for the wonderful work that you do. And I know that most of the pieces we present to dignitaries that come to Longford are all pieces that you have sculpted and that we are very, very proud to give to anybody who comes to Longford. And I know there's some in embassies, there's some in houses of great leaders, and they're all very, very much appreciated. So thank you so much for what you do. You're one of us, and I am so privileged as mayor to say thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for sharing. And this is a book that I will reference when I want someone to put a smile on my face. Thank you very much indeed.
And what about the man himself, Brian Farrell? He's a most accomplished photographer and storyteller. And in the 30 photographs in this lovely book, he evokes nostalgia for another time and an almost bygone age. They say that to be a good photographer, it's more important to click with people before you click your camera. Well, Brian came to each in turn, to each of us, and he had a long chat before he set up his camera to say make rather than take the photograph. He had a way of putting you at ease, chatting easily of times past, of family and friends and events, things you wouldn't normally share with strangers, and then including the hints of the stories that he had heard in the pictures that he took. So therefore, in the background of the photographs, you'll see books and photographs, religious pictures, treasured collections, or some of them are just a quiet, reflective pose by a sunny window or a garden gate, maybe browsing a book, or by a well-built stone wall or a lovely country path. Longford looks very special indeed when you turn the pages of this book. And Brian noted as he chatted with Chris Kennelly that when Board Namona and ESB came to Lanesborough in the 1950s, it brought people here from all over Ireland. How right he was. And though it wasn't the only reason that people made Longford their home. Like, I know that Peggy has gone through it, but there was the lady who met a Longford footballer in Galtymore and Cricklewood. And there's the Garda from Tipperary whose father helped establish the sugar factory in Thurles. And the lady from Leitrim and her husband, who home on holidays from America, set up a travel agency that not only sold the tickets, but with their American experience gave advice on what papers were required and even how to find work when they went over there. And then all the Longford natives who also travelled and then came home again. The young girl who became the missionary in Zambia, and that wonderful soccer player from Burundi who now is here training young boys in Longford. And there's the retired blacksmith who has visited Greece 18 times, or 17 or 18 times, and that's not the half of it. These are the interesting people that they encountered in life. A lot of them encountered very interesting people. I see mention of Dave Allen, the comedian, Seamus Heaney and Brian McMahon, working with politicians like Sean McKeown and Albert Reynolds, and someone even played cards with Princess Diana. Now there you are, match that. And there are poignant stories too, seeing all your late father's possessions auctioned off, taking the emigrant ship, working with those who lost their way in London and Birmingham, losing a wife or a husband. There's hard times in it too. It's all in these pages. And there are the historians. The man who wrote several books on local history, the man who got a tape recorder as a gift from his wife just weeks before she died. It led to the publication of 19 books and another in the pipeline. But not just books. There's art from that most ancient of materials, bog oak, and painting pictures of town or much-loved parents or friends, and artefacts that are stored and restored, old farm machines, and brand new ones to change the life of farming. And even a car that belonged to Michael Collins. They're all pictured side by side with their proud owners. It's all in there in this wonderful collection, in prose and in poetry and in photo. It's a glimpse into a hidden Longford, where you meet people who brought change to town life and rural ways. People who had their joys and their sorrows, and a sense of duty. Bishop Cullum, who was composing his letter of retirement when the cathedral went on fire, so he put it on the shelf and led the great work of restoration for 5 more years. That sense of duty, that, as May Donlan put it, when the big meadow is down, the work has to be done. So I say well done to Bottle Green Design and Rapid Print and Brian Farrell for their professional production of Longford memories. Thank you, Brian, for capturing the spirit of Longford people during the most tragic and challenging year in our lifetime. You certainly clicked with everyone. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Lord save us. I was thinking to myself, I'll have to get a copy of this book. It sounds great, the way you sell it anyway. No, and what a dynamic woman with what a brilliant idea. I was immediately struck by. I kind of wanted to meet Mary in a hurry. And it was about 9 months later I met her. And in a way, I probably only interviewed everybody so I could finally sit down and meet Mary Reynolds, this dynamic woman who, the whole idea of just going into a stranger's home, sitting down and listening to them talk and photographing them, sure, it's exactly the type of thing that I would just love to do, and the type of thing that needs to be done. And I always think of this, a great saying that I heard once, that when you're talking, you're learning nothing. And I've always believed in that so much. It's a bit of a contradiction that I'm talking here now. I didn't realise I was going to be talking here until I walked in the door and Martin says to me, and of course you'll say a few words, and that was the first I knew of it. But going into a stranger's house and listening for an hour or an hour and a half, or sometimes 2 hours, I learnt an awful lot. I learnt a lot about Longford. I learnt a lot about our past. I learnt a lot about our future. I learnt a lot about resilience, determination, dedication, decency. I also learnt a little bit about how suspicious people are of Dubliners. A few doors were opened slowly, and I know they wouldn't have been opened at all except Mary Reynolds had warned them I was on the way. A few people were rightly, I didn't interview any fools, so a few people were rightly cautious. And I always feel when in a situation like we were in, that often people want a little bit before they give a little bit. So I often found myself talking a little bit about my own family and my own background. And I suppose it helped that my name was Farrell and my father was from Roscommon Town. And people then started giving me their stories. And we sat and really I just listened. I mean, it wasn't hard work. It wasn't, there was no pain, there was no difficulty, all it was time. And to be brought into somebody's home at any stage, but the home of a stranger, and to be sat down and just to listen for an hour and a half is such a privilege. It really is. I was concerned at the very start, because Mary said that she would give me a list of suggestions. And I knew I didn't know any of the people on the list. And I was afraid that I was going to be getting the same story all over and over again. And this was going to be sort of 30 repeats of people who mix together closely and who all have the same background and all have the same beliefs. I couldn't have been further from the truth. What an eclectic bunch. Again, it's thanks to Mary, I didn't even have to choose the people. And this eclectic bunch of people with different experiences, different life stories, and different truths. Because often we spoke about the same subjects, but from different perspectives. And often the stories were completely different to what another person had told me, even though we were talking about the same subject. But the experience that people had through different times, that's what I felt was the most important thing that I took away from it, was that even in a county like Longford, that there are so many individuals that have so many individual stories that blended together can tell a history, a brief, recent history of the country, not just of the county. that was one of the great things for me. There were many great things in it. Another thing that I felt the person I was visiting found difficult to accept was that I wasn't going to have a tea or sandwich or scones or anything. Maureen Mulryan forced a jar of jam into my pocket as I tried to keep at a safe distance. But no, she wasn't having it. You weren't coming into this house and leaving without something. I felt bad in other houses where I saw tables set and cups out. Again, it was the sign of the decency of the people right throughout the county that a visitor wasn't going to come and leave hungry. And it always reminds me of when I visit the Famine Museum in Strokestown. It's one of the finest places you can get to eat because they know they want to send people away from a famine museum with a full stomach. And I always think it's wonderful. But another thing, it was hard to get out Paddy Egan's without going into his shed. And I don't know how many of us have gone into that shed, but by God, you could get lost in there. If there were treasures like this that were uncovered for me, it was even more than just sitting down and talking to people, but they were bringing me into the depths of their homes and their beliefs. I got into a few sheds. Of course, I met Eamon Kramer in the shed, and Eamon started trying to tell me about engines, which is a bit of a challenge for me, because really, when my car stops, that's it. But Eamon's understanding of engines it's not like any mechanic I've ever met, because his admiration is for the people who have brought this possible, who have built this, who have, if you made the mechanics of it to help us get away from the hard labor. His respect for these achievements at that time, again, was infectious. And I found myself being interested in machines and now looking at them with a completely different eye. I remember, again, when Mary suggested that I do this, it rang a bell with me because at one stage I was standing in a line in the supermarket waiting to pay, and there was a person a few years older in front of me fumbling for their card to pay, and I could feel impatience in the line behind that person. And I remember thinking, if the people standing in line behind knew the quality of the person who was fumbling for their card, they would never become impatient. Because if they had any idea of the life that this person had lived, they would never become impatient. If they had really any hint of the resilience that it takes to get to a certain age at a certain time in countries, there would be much greater respect for the people who achieved this and the people who have built the country that we now live in and we all benefit from. So that idea of meeting a stranger and sitting down and listening to them tell their stories, well, you only ever leave the house with great respect for the people that you've left behind. And when I go through the book now and I look at all these stories, it explains so much to me. So much about our country, so much about the county. But more than that, it explains to me about people and about how we adapt, how we change, how we go on, how we go forward, and how we try to help. And that was the one thing that I noticed with all the people I spoke to. No matter what their experience, no matter what their background, always they wanted to help. They wanted to do better, they wanted to do good, and they want to share. The other thing that struck me was the amount of writers in this county, the amount of researchers in this county, the amount of people who have been published in this county, the amount of people who look back into their own lives and the lives of their families and the lives of their county and want to share that with a greater audience. And I know for a fact that a lot of that is made possible because of Mary Reynolds, as this book was only made possible because of Mary Reynolds. I was really, really disappointed when I read in the Irish Times the other day that Mary Reynolds is retiring. It's going to be a fantastic loss to this. You know better than I do, but I know that the doors that I walked through were only opened because of Mary Reynolds. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you all very much indeed.
People that I've met as well. And I just want to say, Brian, it's a huge, huge tribute to you that people, first of all, were happy to let you into their home. But secondly, the stories that people were willing to tell you. I was amazed because, as like Peggy said, I thought I knew a lot of these people, knew them in different ways, or would have, but I didn't really know them at all. And it's like us all. We have so many different aspects to our story and to our personality. And every single one of us here has a great story to tell and has many great stories to tell. So I thought this was just an opportunity just to unlock that and to capture some of those stories. But, Brian, even though I mightn't be at the helm here, there will be other people. I can see Martin Mars down there, Paula Mulry, and other people will carry on. And we hope that we will work with you on another project this year and that you will agree to work with us on another project this year. So we have some ideas for that.
It's me chatting to you.
Right, Paddy, go ahead.
My name is Paddy Egan. I come from Cana, South Longford, and I'm delighted to be here tonight and included in the book. And I have here my picture. I'm a farmer, or a retired farmer, not farming anymore, farming all my life. And I've written a lot of poems, and I do a lot of books. And I am a collector, and it's here in the picture that's in the book is some of the collection, and some of it going back a long time. There's an article down here that's a couple of thousand years old. It's great to be in a book like this. I've done a few of them myself, but it's the first time I was ever featured by somebody else. And it's great to be in the crowd here tonight. This is the first time I've been in a crowd for the last 2 years. And the only thing I miss is I shook hands with nobody. So I had my own program on Shannon Site Radio for 3.5 years. I do a bit of storytelling, tell a bit of lies where the truth doesn't fit, and I do a little bit of Gaelic as well. On Gaelic a gumsa, ach Neil Shake a Flúr a gumsa, tá couple of folk gumsa initials a reach, and what's more what I can say?
That's perfect.
Shinny, go to me the good.
Hello there, I'm Kitty Hughes I live in Carriglass, just outside Longford town. I'm a retired teacher. I taught all my life in Auchnagar National School. In fact, according to the Department of Education records, I taught for 45 years and 57 days in the same school. So I drove there every day. I enjoyed it very, very much. Wonderful people, lovely children, and had a very happy life there. I was very happy to welcome Brian Farrell in to do an interview. I didn't know what it was going to consist of, but we ended up having a lovely chat, and he wrote a synopsis or part of the story of what we chatted about in this lovely book that he has produced. And I must say it's lovely to be side by side with so many wonderful people who led wonderful lives, who travelled or maybe stayed at home, who contributed so much to improving life for themselves, for their families, and for the whole community of Longford.
Hello, I'm Lucy, and I come from Keena in County Longford, and I lived there some of my life. I started off in Glasson and then I moved to Keena. So I didn't do an awful lot interesting, mostly homework, home duties, and looked after various members of my family and helped my husband in his business, reared 2 children, and that's really it. Reared 2 children. I was involved in local activities of one way or another as an ICA and different things, and I enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed people, and that's it. And I'm still here and I in the locals. And I don't know why he picked that, and he put me standing. The rest of them were all sitting comfortably in armchairs, and he put me standing. And he got up from his side and put my hands in my pockets for me. Told me to put my hands in my pockets. So that's it. I said it would be nice for my mortuary card, that.
My name is Louis Mcintyre. I was born in Fermanagh, County Longford, and I worked with the Department of Agriculture as an artificial inseminator for 45 years, and I served in Longford County Council for 40 years. Both of the jobs that I enjoyed immensely. They all involved in dealing with the general public, and I always said that 99% of the people were 100%. So that was from the people that I had met. As regards the photograph, Brian wanted to know where he'd meet me, and we had a council meeting on that day, and I said to him if he wanted to come down to the chamber, and he said no, we'd meet in the Longford Arms. So the Longford Arms, that's where the photograph was taken, and I thought it was fair play to Brian. He made me feel very much at ease, and I told my whole life story to him in a very short time. He didn't write the half of it, but still and all, I suppose he wrote enough. So that was my experience, and I want to thank Mary Carolyn Reynolds and everybody involved in having me as part of this book.
Very good. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Benny Reid. I'm from Aucklandcliff in North Longford, and I'm really thrilled with this Longford Memories from Brian Farrell and Mary Carlton Reynolds. It's been a beautiful project, and my family have been particularly impressed with it. I've had my daughters-in-law making sure that they took their copy when they were home at Christmas. It's a very special booklet. And what has struck me about it is the way Brian Farrell was able to, in a very, very easy literary style, was able to capture the essence of so many people, and he was able to capture what drove them, where they came from, and in a very special way those people's take on their neighbours and the county in which they live. It's been a pleasure to be involved with the project. I'm grateful to Mary Carlton Reynolds, and I'm grateful to Brian Farrell for making it possible. Go to Mila Margaret.
My name is Michael Farrell, and actually I refer to myself as Michael J Farrell in recent years when I discovered that there were so many Michael Farrells in this country. I won't bore you with who they are, but I was born in the area of Lanesborough, not so far from the Shannon. I went away to a monastery when I was young and spent some years as a monk, and became involved in a centre for reconciliation in Northern Ireland in a place called Benburb, a historic village up there, trying to bring together and reconcile the two warring parties during the Troubles. I failed to save the world, I have to say, and then I moved on. And I went to America, and I spent much of my life doing tons of journalism, and I reviewed books for the Los Angeles Times. I wrote some novels, a couple of short story collections published here in Ireland, and I'm still writing every day because that's what writers do. They just have to be writing.
Very good. And the photograph, any ideas as to why the photograph you took of you was the photograph, the location, or whatever?
Well, I think that's a question for the photographer to answer better. I think he has a terrific instinct for what would be the right picture for the right occasion and the right person. And because mine, I suppose, was a sort of intellectual background, being in an office rather than out by the stone wall seemed more appropriate. And so we from there it becomes a work in progress. He tries you sitting one way and sitting another, and in the end we compromised, and I ended up sitting on my own desk. I'm an amateur painter on the side, and a couple of my paintings were on the wall, and I think he was trying to fit them in as well. And the rest is history.
My name is Jimmy Donohoe. I'm from Granard, born and reared in Granard. I'm retired. I ran a hardware business, myself and my wife, and actually Quinns of Edgerstown have taken it over now. We're in it for over 54 years, I think we were in our own business. I've been involved on the town commissioners for about 20 years or more, involved in the Harp Festival, and kind of everything good about Granard I was involved in. It was a great town, Granard, and I'm very proud of it, and have great affinity for the people in it, and great schools in Granard. In fact, both Connaughwara and our school, Fodrick, they're both going from strength to strength. The Market House, of course, is now it's an old building, a famous building. John McCormick sang in it in 1905, one of his first venues, and it was helped out by Jimmy Riley, who was the father of Brendan O'Reilly of RTE, and Bernard Mackin sang with him as well, Eddie Mackin's grandfather. So it's the Market House. It's now a library. Mary Reynolds made it a terrific job. Did it upstairs, and there's a photographic exhibition in it at the moment. Some great old photographs of the town. And
Jimmy, the photograph that Brian took, would you know why he decided to take that particular photograph?
He was talking about my sons, John, as you know, pupils of yours died, and Sheila died 6 months between them, and both died of cancer. And because that's why we gave up the shop, because John was running it now at this stage. And the picture of the Sacred Heart was over the settee, and it was one we had all our lives, you know. Sheila had great devotion to the Sacred Heart, so of course that's the reason why he took the photograph on the couch and the Sacred Heart behind us. So that's it.
Jimmy, that's great.
Grand. God bless you.
My name is P.J. Mallon. I'm from Donohoe Cross, Banley, County Longford. I live at the foot of Cornhill, where I lived all my life. And I started off working down the years, first in Bordamona, and then I left there, and I was working with my father in his forge for years until he passed away. And then in the meantime, when I was there, I worked with the local authority as a waterworks caretaker. I stayed him. I went up to when the station started in Cornhill RT. I went to him for a few months, mostly at night working. And from that then, I was married in 1973. My wife came from outside town. She was Anne Stevenson, and from Farneyhogan. And we were married for 29 years until the day she died on the 29th of September. And in 2002. So from that then, my son is a teacher down in Cork, in Bishopstown. He's married to, his wife is Jean, and have 3 kids, two girls and a boy. Very fond of rugby down there. And my daughter lives in Greece, and she is a boy and a girl. And they live in the beautiful city of Fallis. And I visit her every year, and so I'm hoping to see her home this year. So I'm making my trip out there. I've been 18 times in Greece. Some years I went twice, and it's lovely to go to. And especially, and nothing nicer than hopping on a plane when you want to see them and getting away. And that's part of life with me. And now I'm on my own, so I had to stop my work for a while with night problem. And I used to be at gates and different jobs for people. Well, then I just enjoyed it. But coming into it then when I got this, when I heard Brian Farrell was coming to interview me about the forge. With Mary Charlene phoned me up one day and she says, we'll do an interview. And it was the other lady down in North Longford, or in Mary Kiernan, put me on to it. So I got in touch with her, and for a friend of mine, Michael Masterson, he says, go ahead and do the interview and we'll have another night out. He says, well, with you. So that was really part of the lifestyle. But as regards health-wise, I'm fine. Thanks, George. So now that's really part of life. I have one sister lives on her own. My brother lives, and he has 4 in family, and they're all 2 in Ireland and 1 in Toulouse in France, and the other girl, she's in London, a nurse. So that's where the way they're all around. So that's nearly all I can tell you about the story of life. Life is, that's the end of it nearly. But other than that, the whole thing is your health at the end of the day.